This Read Aloud is brought to you by Walnut Middle School's Media Center.
Okay, well, I am really excited to be here today to read one of my favorite stories. This is a read aloud that I did every year with my students. I would figure out a way to incorporate it into my curriculum because it was just so fun. I am battling a little bit of a head cold here, so if I have to pause or take a sip, I apologize up front. But this is one of my favorites. It's called Bubba the Cowboy Prince, a fractured fairy tale. So it is a rewrite of Cinderella, and I often use it in my Cinderella unit. It's by Helen Ketteman, and it's illustrated by James Warhola.
And this one is even a signed copy.
It is. I saw that. I thought that was really impressive. This was a Golden Sower a few years ago, so probably as part of that tour. Yeah. I bet that the illustrator was here in Grand Island, which is super exciting. Alrighty, so here we go. Once, a strapping young feller named Bubba lived on a ranch with his wicked stepdaddy and his hateful and lazy stepbrothers Dwayne and Milton. Bubba's stepdaddy spoiled Dwayne and Milton to no end, but Bubba worked from sun up to sundown, doing chores of 3 ranch hands. Bubba never complained, though. He loved ranching. Dwayne and Milton spent their days sitting on horseback and bossing Bubba around. "Get them doggies along there, Bubba," ordered Dwayne. "Yeah, watch out for them cow patties, Milton. You know how Daddy hates for you to track up the house." Now, Miss Lorraine, who lived down the road a piece, well, she was the purtiest and the richest gal in the county. She owned the biggest spread west of the Brazos, and she loved ranching too. But it was lonesome work, and after a while, she decided it was time for some companionship. "I am to find myself a fella," she said, "one who loves ranching as much as I do. And it wouldn't hurt none if he was cute as cow's ear either." Miss Lorraine decided to throw a ball. She sent invitations to all the ranchers in Texas. Soon the day of the ball arrived, and Milton and Dwayne spent all their day getting gussied up in their finest duds. Bubba about ran hisself ragged waiting on him. "Bubba," shouted Dwayne, "fetch my bolo tie." "Bubba," shouted Dwayne, "get my boots polished." "Bubba," shouted the wicked stepdaddy, "brush them horses and wash that wagon." By the time Dwayne and Milton and their wicked stepdaddy were ready to go, Bubba was exhausted. Still, as they climbed into the wagon, Bubba asked, "Well, couldn't you wait for me to get ready? I want to go to the dance with Miss Lorraine, too." Dwayne and Milton and their wicked stepdaddy hooted and hollered. "Oh, why, you're sorry that a steer in a stockyard," said Dwayne. "Can you imagine Miss Lorraine dancing with the likes of you?" said Milton. "Miss Lorraine wouldn't even wipe the dirt clods off her boots with that raggedy shirt of yours, and you smell more like the cattle than the cattle do." Bubba took a look at himself. Oh, it was true. He didn't have a decent shirt to wear. His boots were downright disgraceful, and he did smell a bit rough. Milton and Dwayne were right. Miss Lorraine wouldn't dance with the likes of him. Bubba hung his head. He felt lower than a rattlesnake in a gully. Milton and Dwayne and their wicked stepdaddy went off to the ball. Bubba mounted his horse and headed out for the pasture to check on the herd. The sky was getting darker than a black bull at midnight, and it looked like a Texas thunderstorm was brewing. Bubba had just arrived at the cow pasture when a bolt of lightning struck, knocking him off his horse. Bubba was stunned for a moment, but then he picked himself up. He heard a voice. "Go to the ball, Bubba," said the voice. Bubba looked around, but there was no one there but him and the cows. Now, Bubba figured he'd been bonked the bejeebers out of his bean, 'cause the voice was coming from a cow. And she chewed her cud for a moment, then she said, "I'm your fairy god cow, and I can help you go to the ball." Bubba sat up, rubbing his head. I'd like to go, Miss God Cow, but shoot, I don't have a thing to wear. The fairy god cow swished her tail, and Bubba's ragged clothes changed from the handsomest cowboy duds he'd ever laid eyes on. His jeans were crisp, his boots were shiny, his shirt was dazzling, and his Stetson was whiter than a new salt lick. "Why, I look downright purty," said Bubba. The fairy god cow swished her tail again, and a nearby steer turned into the most beautiful white stallion that Bubba had ever seen. "Now, you go off to the ball, Bubba, and have a good time dancing with Miss Lorraine. But you have to be home by midnight, 'cause that's when the magic runs out." "Yahoo!" shouted Bubba as he jumped on the white horse and galloped off to the ball. When Bubba arrived, the hoedown was in full swing, but every time Miss Lorraine finished a dance, she just yawned. "There goes another $10 Stetson on a 5-cent head," she complained. "Where are all the real cowboys?" Well, by the time it was Bubba's turn to dance with Miss Lorraine, it was almost midnight. And soon as she saw Bubba, Miss Lorraine's eyes lit up. "Why, you're cute as a cow's ear," she said. Bubba blushed, and then took Miss Lorraine in his arms and started dancing, and Dwayne and Milton turned purple with jealousy. "Who's that dude?" said Dwayne. "I don't recollect seeing him before, but he looks a mite familiar," said Milton. "Do something," said their wicked stepdaddy. "That cowboy's winning Miss Lorraine's heart." As it turned out, Milton and Dwayne didn't have to do a thing, because Bubba and Miss Lorraine were in the middle of do-si-doing when the clock struck midnight. Well, suddenly Bubba's fine duds turned into dirty rags that he usually wore around the ranch, and he looked sorry, and he smelled worse. "What's that awful smell?" says Milton. "Why, it's Bubba," shouted Dwayne. And Bubba turned 14 shades of red, apologized to Miss Lorraine, and ran out of the room. "Wait!" she yelled, chasing after him. But Bubba didn't wait. He jumped on his cow and lumbered off into the night. In the ruckus, he lost one of his dirty cowboy boots. Miss Lorraine clasped it in her arms. "This is the boot of a real cowboy, and the man I want to marry. I aim to find him." Miss Lorraine went back inside, and although she asked everybody at the ball, nobody knew who the mysterious cowboy was. Nobody except Dwayne and Milton and their wicked stepdaddy, that is. But they weren't talking. The next day, Miss Lorraine went from ranch to ranch looking for cowboys who owned the boot. And when she came to Dwayne and Milton's ranch, both brothers tried the boot on. But it didn't fit. Miss Lorraine just climbed onto her horse to leave when Bubba rode up. He was dirty and sweaty and smelly from working with the cows, and he was only wearing one boot. Miss Lorraine jumped off her horse and ran over to Bubba. "Try this on," she cried. Bubba took his dirty old boot and pulled it on. "Much obliged, ma'am," he said, blushing. It fit perfectly. "You are my prince in cowboy boots," shouted Miss Lorraine. "I'd recognize that smell anywhere. Marry me, cowboy, and help me work my ranch." Dwayne and Milton and their wicked stepdaddy threw chicken fits. But Bubba just smiled, and he and Miss Lorraine rode off into the sunset. And they lived happily ever after, roping and cowpoking and getting them doggies along. The end.
That was so good.
Isn't that awesome? I love that story.
That was a great adaptation there.
Yeah.
Click
Good times. There we go.
And boop.
Okay.
All right. So when did you find this book?
I found that book when I was looking for other stories to add into my Cinderella unit. So in the 7th grade, we studied kind of, believe it or not, world literature. So we had Cinderella from China, and we had a Cinderella from Native Americans, and an Indian one. And I thought, I need something else just to kind of make it fun and spice it up. And I found that in our library at our middle school, and I've loved it ever since. Yeah.
Well, that's great because it opens it up to all those other Cinderella adaptations that are just like everywhere.
They're
are
everywhere.
All over the place.
Yes, yeah. And the students were able to not only make those connections, but then just have fun in the process. And one of the things we always worked on in my classes too was reading fluency and voices and readers theater. And so those opportunities that I had to model for them some of what you could bring to a story, I always try to incorporate in my classes, so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, now when did you start really reading? When you knew that you loved reading? When was that?
Oh, I was little. I think it was before I could read. I remember being 3 years old and going with my mom to story hour at the library. I remember begging for certain books to be read over and over and over again. The Little Engine That Could, The Pokey Little Puppy. And so I have always just absolutely loved reading. I think I often say, though, that in middle school was the time when I really figured out that I could become who I wanted to be through reading. I really started to identify with characters and find ways to deal with my life through the characters that I was reading about.
So one of your favorites from back then, well, what was one of your favorite ones in middle school?
7th grade, I often said, Anne of Green Gables saved me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
My wife says the same thing.
Yeah. I read the whole series. I then read everything Ellen Montgomery wrote. I discovered in the 7th grade what interlibrary loan was.
Ooh.
Because I went out and I found every single book that Ellen Montgomery ever wrote, and then would have them brought into my public library so I could read them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Interlibrary loan, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
This one is from the amazing Miss Tell over at Dodge.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
She loaned this to us.
Yeah.
So interlibrary loan right
It's
here.
a good thing.
Okay, so then would you say those are still your favorite books?
No, I think, as you grow and you read more, your tastes develop and they change. I am a wide reader, though. I probably read maybe 60 novels a year, and all sorts of genres. I love nonfiction. I love historical fiction, mysteries. I'll even read some what they call chick lit, some sweet little romance. And so I have a wide variety of likes. Some of my favorites, I love Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible. That is a timeless favorite. And every year, probably sometime in the summer, I find myself rereading Pride and Prejudice.
Yes. Oh my goodness, so good.
Yeah, and then and I reread the Harry Potter series regularly. I've read every one of those books probably at least 6 to 7 times.
Good.
Yeah, I love that series.
Good.
And I'm a rereader,
super
obviously.
I
love to
love
reread.
rereading as well.
Yeah.
Now, what are you reading currently?
Currently, I am reading a book called These Is My Words, and it's written like a diary of pioneer times of a girl who's on the trail in Arizona, and her family is trying to find a place, but where they thought they could settle, they couldn't, and so now they're just sort of on the trail with the army at this point. So that's what I'm reading. It's a historical fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Kids are walking by.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Oh,
I
thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah, no, it was great. Anytime. I love to read. So
yeah, it was fun to listen to you. That was amazing.
Okay.